she had just been fired for sleeping on the job. But what her boss found left the entire company in silence. Chicago, late October. The night air was sharp, and the streets were mostly empty except for the rumble of buses and the occasional cab hurrying past. On the 12th floor of a sleek office building on West Madison Street, one light remained on long after the rest had gone dark. Emily Carter, 28, wiped the sweat from her brow with the sleeve of her janitor's uniform. Her shift started at 6 p.m. and ended around 2 in the morning. Most nights, no one noticed her. She moved from desk to desk, emptying trash bins, wiping down counters, and quietly fixing things others had left broken. She never complained. Not when the bathrooms were left in a mess. Not when the elevator broke and she had to carry trash bags down 12 flights of stairs. Not even when her supervisor, Mr. Langford, gave her a second warning for being found asleep near the copier room. Tonight, she was back in that same room. The office had fallen quiet hours ago. The last remaining manager had turned off his desk lamp and vanished into the elevator. Emily was alone again. She reached into her cleaning cart, pulled out a folded sheet of graph paper, and spread it across the desk. There were pencil markings, flow charts, and lists of numbers. She scribbled something quickly, glancing toward the clock. She had 20 minutes left before the trash pickup. That meant she had 10 more minutes to work on the plan. Her eyes flicked to her watch, then to the paper again. She pressed her pencil to the corner and started sketching the outline of a layout redesign. She didn't hear the door open behind her. Mr. Langford stood in the doorway, holding his clipboard, scanning the darkroom. His eyes narrowed. There she was again, slumped forward, her head resting on her folded arms. Beside her sat a pile of hand-drawn pages. To him, it looked like she was dozing off on company time. Again, he cleared his throat, loudly. Emily stirred but didn't open her eyes. Mr. Langford stepped forward. That was it. He didn't say a word. He simply marked her name on his report and left the room without giving her a chance to wake or explain. Outside the room, he let out a slow breath. 3 strikes. That was the policy. And this was strike number 3. The next morning, Emily was called into HR at 8:30 a.m. sharp. She hadn't even gone home yet. Her uniform still smelled like ammonia and dust. The HR rep didn't meet her eyes. Neither did Mr. Langford. The room was sterile. Beige walls. Laminated posters about workplace respect. A large digital clock on the wall ticked slowly as the rep explained the termination details. Emily said nothing. Not in defense. Not in anger. When asked if she had anything to say, she reached into her bag and pulled out a large sealed envelope. Her hands were trembling. She placed it gently on the table and said quietly, "I was going to turn this in today anyway." The rep nodded, not looking up. Mr. Langford barely reacted. With her name badge removed and a final signature on the dismissal form, Emily left the building. She didn't glance back. The envelope stayed behind, untouched. The day went on. Emails flowed. Meetings were held. Coffee cups were emptied and refilled. By 2 p.m., the envelope was still sitting in the HR inbox. It would have stayed there longer, unnoticed, if not for a curious intern named Danny. Danny had just started 2 weeks ago. 22, fresh out of college, and always hungry for something interesting. He had come to drop off a document and noticed a sealed envelope with the management written on the front in neat, cursive handwriting. He asked, "Hey, is this going to someone?" The HR assistant shrugged. Danny picked it up. He didn't know it yet, but that moment would change the company forever. Danny held the envelope in both hands like it was made of glass. There was something oddly careful about the handwriting. Intentional, like it wasn't rushed or emotional, but deliberate, like someone had taken time to craft every curve of every letter. To management. That was all it said on the front. He looked around. The HR assistant was now sipping coffee and scrolling on her screen. No one else was paying attention. Danny cleared his throat. "Mind if I take a look?" The assistant shrugged. "It's probably just a complaint. She got let go this morning. 3rd time sleeping on the job. Case closed." Danny frowned. Still, shouldn't someone read it? She gave him a tired look, then waved him off. He sat down in the corner of the room. carefully unsealed the flap, and pulled out the contents. At first, he thought it was a resume, but then his brow furrowed. It was 8 pages long, all handwritten. On each page were flow charts, tables, numbers, sketches of custodial closets, and floor maps of the building's interior. There were notes about supply usage, time schedules, and even foot traffic heat maps drawn in highlighter. The title at the top of the first page read, Proposal, Redesigning Janitorial Operations for Increased Efficiency and Budget Optimization. By the third page, Danny's jaw was slightly open. He muttered under his breath, "This is insane." She had calculated projected savings if they shifted floor cleanings to alternating schedules and replaced a specific cleaning agent with a lower cost, eco-friendly option. She even suggested rotating night shift staff in a new pattern that would save over 1,200 hours in paid overtime annually. By the last page, the projected annual savings was circled in red pen, $51,322.74. And at the bottom, in small letters, was a signature, Emily Carter, night janitor. Danny didn't hesitate. He ran out of the HR office, the pages trembling in his hands. 5 minutes later, he burst into Mr. Langford's office without knocking. Mr. Langford, seated at his desk in mid-conversation with department head, looked up, irritated. "Danny, I'm in a meeting. You need to see this." "Sir." Langford started to object, but something in the intern's voice stopped him. Danny laid the packet down on the desk, page 1 facing up. Langford raised an eyebrow, leaned forward, and began to read. 2 minutes passed, then 5. The department head tried to excuse himself, but Langford lifted a hand. "Wait." 10 minutes later, Langford leaned back in his chair, the edges of the last page trembling in his fingers. He didn't say anything. Danny broke the silence. "She gave that to HR this morning, before she left." Langford blinked. "She wasn't sleeping on the job." Danny said, "She was working. She probably passed out from exhaustion." Langford didn't respond, but his jaw had tightened and the blood had drained from his face. He turned his chair toward the window. The skyline of Chicago stretched beyond the glass. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I never even asked her what she was working on." By the end of the day, the proposal had been scanned and forwarded to the executive office. By the next morning, a mandatory staff meeting had been scheduled, and by Friday the entire office knew her name, Emily Carter, the janitor no one really talked to, the one they all thought was just tired, the one who had quietly written a plan to save the company over $50,000, while sweeping floors, cleaning bathrooms, and wiping up coffee spills no one else cared about. And now she was gone. The following Monday, the office buzzed with whispers. Her name, Emily, was passed around like a rumor, spoken in disbelief and mild shame. Most had never even looked at her closely. She was just part of the background, someone whose job was invisible unless something was out of place. Now, her handwriting was being studied by executives in glass-walled conference rooms. Danny sat alone in the break room, watching the news spread. His copy of her proposal was now paper-clipped and highlighted, covered in yellow sticky notes with the initials of executives. She had built something brilliant, on her own, with no support and no recognition. He couldn't stop thinking about the last time he had seen her. That morning in HR, the way she stood there in her janitor uniform, looking like she hadn't slept in days, the envelope trembling in her hand. And yet, she said nothing except, "I was going to turn this in today anyway." She wasn't bitter. She wasn't desperate. She had just wanted someone to notice. Mr. Langford didn't sleep that night. He paced around his condo, replaying everything in his head. The night he saw her in the copier room, the way her head was down on the desk, how close he had gotten, how he never noticed the pencil in her hand, the blueprints, the folder of notes. He hadn't cared. He thought she was just another employee slacking off, another problem to fix. But now he knew. She wasn't sleeping. She had been working harder than any of them. On Tuesday morning, Langford arrived early. He walked the hallways alone, stopping by the copier room. It was quiet, dusty, a few marks from the wheels of her cart. still remained on the floor. He stood there for several minutes. Then he turned and left without saying a word. Danny couldn't get her out of his mind. He started digging. He searched employee records. He pulled up her application. It had barely any details, just her name, address, and former employer, Brighton Logistics. No resume, no cover letter. Just a short note that read, available for night shifts. Experience with maintenance, safety, and logistics planning. He checked her former employer online. The company had gone through bankruptcy 2 years ago. That same week, Danny visited the old building Emily had listed as her home. It was a rundown apartment complex in South Lawndale. The front desk clerk barely remembered her. Quiet girl, he said. Never caused any trouble. Always paid on time. Left about 4 days ago. No forwarding address. Danny left a note with his number, just in case. But in his gut, he knew Emily didn't want to be found. Back at the office, Langford brought her proposal into the executive meeting himself. At first, the board looked skeptical. This was written by who again? One of them asked, flipping through the hand-drawn graphs. Langford looked at them evenly. A janitor? Laughter. One of them scoffed. You're joking. Langford shook his head. Read page 3. They did, and by the time they reached page 5, no one was laughing anymore. By page 8, the CEO himself was nodding slowly. Who is she? He asked. Langford hesitated. She no longer works here. Silence. The CEO leaned forward. Find her. The proposal was now pinned to bulletin boards in every department. Managers were instructed to review it line by line. Teams were assigned to run simulations on her calculations. And every time someone found a number that checked out, it echoed through the office like a shockwave. She had been right. All of it. But she was gone. Gone without a trace. And no one had any idea where she went. Not yet. By the end of the week, everyone knew her name. Even those who never worked a night shift now spoke about her like a myth. Emily Carter, the janitor who wrote a 6-figure strategy document. Emily Carter, the girl who never said a word but saw everything. Emily Carter, the one we all ignored. The whispers had turned to respect, then regret, and for some shame. The office buzzed with questions no one dared say out loud. How could someone so intelligent be stuck pushing a mop? Why didn't she tell anyone what she was working on? Why didn't they ask? Mr. Langford found himself avoiding mirrors. The operations manager, Carla, reviewed Emily's proposal again for the 4th time. She couldn't find a single miscalculation. Everything was spot on. Her inventory analysis, her foot traffic charts, even the wear and tear replacement schedule was perfectly timed. She must have stayed late for weeks to get this data, Carla whispered. Danny nodded. She did. I was here late a few nights. I remember seeing her walking the halls with a notebook. Carla sighed. You think she was trying to get promoted? Danny shook his head. I think she just wanted to help. She saw a problem, and she solved it. Carla looked up, and nobody listened. The company had already begun implementing parts of her plan. The new schedule for restroom rotation had saved them nearly $3,000 in the first week. One of the vendors had reviewed her cleaning agent swap and confirmed the alternative would cut costs by 40% with no loss in quality. It was working. Emily had left them a gift, a legacy, and they had shown her the door before opening the envelope. Langford finally broke his silence during a manager briefing. He stood at the front of the room, Emily's name written across the whiteboard in red marker. Her proposal sat on the table beside him. I made a mistake, he said plainly. I thought I saw someone slacking off. I didn't see what was in front of me. The room was dead quiet. He continued. Emily wasn't sleeping on the job. She was building something, on her own time, with no recognition. And he paused, his voice tightening, I fired her for it. Nobody interrupted. I've contacted HR. We're offering her the chance to return, but not as a janitor. A murmur rose around the room. Langford straightened. We're offering her a position in operations leadership, effective immediately if she accepts. Someone in the back clapped, then a second, then the whole room. But there was still one problem. They didn't know where she was. That afternoon, Danny printed missing person-style flyers, but without the word missing. Just her name, a photo clip from her ID badge, and a message. Emily Carter, if you see this, your voice was heard. Please come back. He posted it in cafes, libraries, laundromats. He asked building doormen, grocers, bus drivers. Most people shook their heads. But then, in a coffee shop near Logan Square, someone said, "Wait, is that the girl who writes at the window seat every morning?" Danny froze. "Where?" The barista pointed. "She usually sits here around 9. Orders a drip coffee, always writing on paper." Danny nodded slowly. Hope, quiet but firm, began to rise in his chest. The next morning, he waited. At exactly 9:02, she walked in. Emily Carter. Same faded hoodie. Same quiet steps. She didn't recognize him. She ordered her coffee, then walked to the back corner, placed a stack of papers on the table, and began writing. Danny approached gently, not wanting to scare her. "Emily," he said softly. She looked up, confused. "I'm Danny, from the office." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "We read your proposal." She froze. Danny smiled. "Everyone read it." Her hand slowly covered the top of the page she was writing on. "They want you back," he said. "Not as janitor. As a leader." Emily stared at him, and for the first time since she had left that building, her eyes filled with tears. The next day, Emily stood outside the building she thought she'd never see again. It was colder now. Wind cut through the streets like knives, and her thin jacket offered little protection. She clutched her small notebook in both hands. Her fingers trembled, not from the chill, but from the weight of what this day meant. No uniform, no badge. This time, she walked in as herself. The lobby was buzzing. The receptionist did a double take when she saw her. Whispers followed Emily as she passed. People she didn't know looked up from their phones, nudged each other, and stared. They all recognized her now. But there was no applause, no standing ovation, just silence, and that, somehow, felt more real. Danny greeted her by the elevators. He was nervous, like a younger brother watching his sibling walk into her college graduation. "You ready?" he asked. Emily didn't answer. She just nodded. The elevator dinged, and they rode to the 12th floor. Mr. Langford was waiting outside his office, fidgeting with his watch. When he saw her, he stood straighter. "Emily," he said quietly. She didn't look away. "Mr. Langford." "I owe you an apology," he said, "and a job offer." She raised an eyebrow. "You fired me." "I was wrong." There was a long pause between them. Then she simply said, "I know." They brought her to the operations wing. A room had already been cleared, a desk prepared, a nameplate hastily printed on a printer and placed near the door. It said, "Emily Carter, Operations Innovation Consultant." She stared at it for a moment, her hand still on the doorknob. Inside, the office smelled like new carpet. The windows were spotless. The desk was bare, except for a single folder. Inside that folder were two things. One, her original handwritten proposal, now laminated and annotated in blue ink. And two, a formal letter offering her a full-time position with salary, benefits, and the title Senior Process Analyst. Emily placed the letter on the desk, then slowly sat down. It was too quiet. She went back to work immediately. Not in front of a crowd, not with fanfare. She began drafting revisions to her original plan, integrating department feedback, streamlining her previous foot traffic model. Her pencil danced over the paper again, just like it had before, but this time the lights were on, and someone was watching. Carla, the operations manager, stopped by later that afternoon. "I looked up your background," she said gently. "Brighton Logistics. You worked there for 3 years." Emily nodded. "I led systems coordination." Carla raised her eyebrows. "That's no small job." "I left to care for my mom," Emily said, her tone flat. "Couldn't get rehired after that. No one wanted to take a risk on someone who had been gone." Carla looked at her for a long moment. "Well," she said finally, "this company doesn't deserve you, but it needs you, And with that, she turned and left. That evening, as the office lights dimmed and employees packed up for the night, Emily stayed behind. Alone again, but not unseen. She laid out her papers, made a fresh pot of coffee, and began sketching something new, a plan for training entry-level staff to think like analysts, a system for recognizing unseen labor, a way to make sure what happened to her wouldn't happen to someone else. She wrote late into the night. This time, if she fell asleep at the desk, someone would notice. 3 days after Emily's return, the office was running smoother than it had in years. Supervisors from other branches called in, asking about the new cleaning rotations and inventory logs. Emails poured into the operations wing with questions, updates, even praise. The company had officially begun phase 1 of Emily's proposal across multiple departments. But Emily remained quiet. She worked from her desk, rarely stepping outside her office unless she had to. She wore the same faded jacket each day, took her lunch in the back corner of the break room, spoke only when necessary. To the rest of the staff, she was still a mystery. To Langford, she was a reminder. Late one night, long after most had gone home, Mr. Langford found himself wandering the 12th floor again. The copier room was empty, the same room where he'd seen her sleep. The moment he thought she was lazy, the moment he chose to fire her. But now he saw it differently. He approached the desk she had used that night. Something made him pause. There was still a folder tucked underneath. It had been pushed far back under the divider, wedged into a corner. He reached for it. Inside were a few crumpled drafts. Early sketches of her first proposal. Mistakes crossed out. Notes scribbled in the margins. At the very bottom was a yellow sticky note. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. Just one sentence, written in faint blue ink. If I don't wake up, please make sure this gets to someone who can use it. Langford froze. His fingers trembled as he held the note. She wasn't just tired that night. She was exhausted, mentally, physically. She had worked herself to the edge. Not for glory, not for a raise, but to leave something behind that mattered. And she had thought, even then, that no one would care, that maybe someone would find her papers after she was gone. Langford's throat tightened. The room spun a little. He sat down slowly at the desk, still holding the sticky note. For the first time in a long time, he felt small. The next morning, Langford called a full meeting. No schedule, no agenda, just a single instruction in the company-wide email. Please meet on the 12th floor. I have something to show you. By 10 a.m., nearly every department head and supervisor was gathered in the main conference room. Even the CO attended. Langford walked in, holding nothing but the sticky note. He didn't speak right away. He just placed the note on the center of the table. People leaned forward to read it. Their expressions shifted. He finally said, "This was found beneath the copier desk. It's from Emily. She left it the night before she was fired." Silence. Langford continued. She didn't know anyone would read her proposal. She didn't expect praise or recognition. She just wanted it to matter. He looked around the room, and we nearly threw it away. Later that day, the sticky note was framed and placed beside the company's mission statement in the lobby. No name, no explanation, just a word she wrote. Those who knew the story didn't need more. Those who didn't, they would ask, and someone would tell them. Emily walked to the lobby 2 days later and noticed a crowd standing near the wall. She slowed her pace. There, just beneath the mission statement plaque, was something new, a small, simple glass frame. Inside it, her sticky note. Her breath caught. She stepped forward. People turned to look at her, but didn't speak. Some stepped aside to give her space. She stared at the note. "If I don't wake up, please make sure this gets to someone who can use it." Her eyes moved over the words she had written without thinking they would ever be seen. Now they were behind glass. Emily didn't cry. She simply reached out, brushed her fingers gently along the edge of the frame, and then turned and walked back to the elevator. Danny had seen the whole thing from across the lobby. He didn't approach her. He just smiled. Upstairs, Emily returned to her desk and found a small stack of folders waiting. Each folder came from a different department. Inside were notes, ideas, even handwritten proposals from employees at every level, some from janitors, some from interns. One had a sketch of a new recycling process. Another showed a reimagined supply chain routing plan. And every folder had one thing in common. On the front was a small yellow sticky note. Each note had a message written to her. Some said, "I never knew I was allowed to try. You showed me it was okay to care. You made me believe someone might listen." Emily sat back in her chair. She had only meant to leave behind a solution, but she had started something bigger. Mr. Langford knocked on her door that afternoon. He entered quietly and placed a folder on her desk. "No deadline," he said. "Just thought you might want to help shape our intern mentorship program." Emily looked at the cover page. It was blank, except for a single line. Designed by people who were never asked. She looked up at him. Langford shifted his weight. He seemed unsure what to say. "I'm still learning," he admitted, "how to see people." Emily offered a small nod. "That's a good place to start." Word of Emily's story began to spread outside the office. An industry blog picked it up, then a local news site. A headline appeared on the front page of a small Chicago publication. "The janitor who rebuilt a company," before anyone noticed. Other companies called to ask if she would consult. She politely declined. She wasn't interested in fame. She wanted to build something that lasted. Right where she was. One Friday afternoon, Danny found her in the break room, typing quietly at a laptop. He sat across from her with a coffee. "They're asking about you in the Denver branch," he said. "They want to name a training module after you." She chuckled softly. "That's ridiculous." He smirked. "You're a legend now." "I don't want to be a legend." "What do you want to be?" She looked up at him. "Useful." Emily stood at the window later that evening, watching the streetlights flicker to life. Below, a new janitor was pushing a cart across the marble floor, her shoulders hunched with fatigue. Emily made a note to speak to her on Monday. She wouldn't let this one go unseen. That weekend, while cleaning out her old backpack at home, Emily found something she had forgotten, folded deep in the bottom pocket, beneath a granola bar and a nearly empty pencil case, was a letter, still sealed, still addressed. It was written months ago. The envelope read, "To HR, in case of termination." She stared at it for a long time, heart slowing. She remembered writing it. She had typed it up on her old laptop late one night after her second warning. At the time, she wasn't angry, just realistic. She had seen how the system worked. Nobody listened to night staff. Nobody gave second chances to people in faded uniforms. She had written the letter not to fight for her job, but to leave something behind. One final message in case the worst happened. And now, here it was, still sealed. She carefully opened it. Inside were just 3 paragraphs. No emotion, no accusations, just her story, her background, her role at Brighton Logistics, the years she had spent caring for her sick mother, the temporary jobs that never became permanent, the nights when she stayed up drawing blueprints by lamplight, and one final line. "If I am no longer needed here, I understand. But please consider this proposal as a parting contribution." She read it twice, then 3 times. She sat in silence, then slowly fed the letter into the shredder by her desk. She didn't need it anymore. She wasn't invisible now. The following Monday, the company rolled out the new initiative. It was called the ECHO program, designed for frontline workers, part-time staff, and overlooked employees. It gave every team member a direct channel to submit ideas, complaints, or plans, without fear of being dismissed or ignored. Each submission was reviewed by a rotating committee made up of executives, managers, and one elected representative from custodial, security, or food service each quarter. And every new employee, on day 1, was handed a small yellow sticky note with one sentence printed on it. "If I don't wake up, please make sure this gets to someone who can use it." Emily didn't want her name on it. She insisted the program be about the message, not the person. But people knew. They always knew. And when employees whispered to one another in the break room about the company's change of heart, they always traced it back to her, to the girl who almost disappeared before anyone saw what she carried, to the janitor who left a note, just in case no one noticed her work before she was gone. to the quiet worker who, without ever speaking loudly, changed everything. One morning, Mr. Langford stepped into her office. He looked older somehow, even though it had only been a few months. He held a box. "Found this in storage," he said. "It's your old badge from your janitor days." She took it, looked at the faded photo. Her hair pulled back. No makeup. Tired eyes. She smiled. "You want to throw it away?" he asked gently. Emily shook her head. "No, I want to frame it." Langford blinked. "Really? I want to remember where I was when I did my best work." He nodded slowly, then left the room in silence. Later that afternoon, Emily hung the framed badge above her desk, right beside the final version of her 8-page proposal. And beneath it, just one small sticky note. The original, faint, yellowed, but still legible. "If I don't wake up, please make sure this gets to someone who can use it." She leaned back in her chair. The company hadn't just found her note. They had finally found her voice. Months passed. Emily no longer walked the factory floor with a mop or a trash bin. She walked it with a clipboard and a badge that read, "Senior Process Improvement Officer." But she made a promise to herself. She would never forget the view from down there. Every Thursday at midnight, she would change out her blazer and heels, slip into plain black sneakers, and spend 2 hours quietly walking the overnight shift, not inspecting, not correcting, just watching, listening. She'd sit in the break room with the sanitation team, share vending machine coffee with the security guards, and listen to guys unloading pallets in the loading dock talk about their kids. She didn't take notes. She didn't bring a tablet. She just stayed, and the workers noticed. They noticed when the vending machine finally got restocked with healthier options. They noticed when overtime forms were shortened from 5 pages to 1. And they noticed when, during the next town hall meeting, she referred to the team as we, not they. One rainy Thursday, a new hire named Marcus joined the cleaning crew. Quiet guy, mid-30s. Seemed smart, but didn't talk much. Emily spotted him sitting alone at 3 a.m., staring at his phone. She sat across from him. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "I saw you in the newsletter," he said. "They said you used to work down here." She smiled. "Still do, just from a different angle now." He looked unsure, then slowly slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "I don't know who to give this to," he said. "It's just something I've been working on." She unfolded it. Crude sketches. A basic reorganization of supply lockers to save walking time. A proposed shortcut to reduce injury when lifting heavy bins. Simple, smart, real. "Thank you," she said. Marcus looked surprised. "Really?" Emily leaned forward. "I was you once." He stared at her for a long moment. Then his shoulders relaxed. "Will someone read it?" She folded the paper gently, slid it into her pocket, and stood. "I will." By the end of the quarter, Marcus's redesign saved the janitorial team an average of 17 minutes per shift. It reduced back injuries by 22%, and it was credited in the annual report as employee-driven innovation. Emily never announced these things. She let the numbers speak for themselves. And the workers? They knew. They whispered about her with respect. The girl who once slept on the job, the one who left behind a note no one expected, now had a seat at the table, because she built the table herself. 1 year to the day after her firing, Brighton Logistics held its first night shift recognition gala. No suits, no stage, no speeches, just food, music, laughter, a celebration of the hands that worked while others slept. Emily gave out the first award of the night. It was a small silver plaque, inscribed with only 7 words. Words that now lived in the heart of every shift, every break room, every whisper in the dark. "If I don't wake up, please remember me." And they always would. They always would. Ever since the night he walked into that office and found Emily asleep beside that haunting note, Mr. Redford had been a different man. The transformation hadn't been loud or dramatic. It was quiet, subtle, but unmistakable. Gone were the days of barking orders and walking past employees without so much as eye contact. The one stiff executive now made it a habit to pause in the break room, ask about someone's kid, offer a real smile, not the kind reserved for board meetings. His assistant, Laura, once overheard him on a call. "I had it wrong," he said into the receiver. "The people down there, they're not background noise. They're the heartbeat." There was silence on the other end. Then Mr. Redford added, "A janitor reminded me." He started attending third-shift briefings, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He'd show up in jeans and a windbreaker, carry his own coffee, and lean on the wall just to watch how things ran when most executives were asleep. And when people asked why, he'd say, "You miss too much when you only look down from above." It didn't stop there. Redford launched a new initiative, the Echo Project. It was simple. Every month, one idea from a janitorial or overnight team would be reviewed by upper management and implemented if viable. The result? New procedures, better safety gear, streamlined maintenance schedules, and more importantly, a shift in culture. For the first time in company history, the suggestion box was emptied every week, because now someone actually listened. One day, Mr. Redford pulled Emily aside in the main hallway. He was holding a small, black frame. Inside was a note, her original note, crisp now, preserved behind glass. "I thought this belonged in your office," he said. Emily looked at it, then up at him. "It doesn't belong in an office," she said. Without another word, she took the frame and walked to the main lobby. She found a spot on the wall, just beside the security desk, where every shift passed by. There, she hung it. Employees paused as they walked past. Some stopped completely. They read the note, and they remembered. That morning, Redford issued a formal memo to the entire company. It was only 2 sentences long. "Everyone deserves to be seen, especially in the dark." Signed, James Redford, CEO, Brighton Logistics. That memo was framed too, right beside the note. And from that day forward, every new employee, whether cleaner, engineer, or clerk, was given a tour that ended at that wall. A wall that told a story. A story about a girl who once fell asleep at her desk and woke up an entire company.